I woke up around 2 in the morning to the sound of a faint tapping on my window. At first, I thought it was the rain, but when I lifted my head and looked toward the glass, I felt my blood run cold. There was a man standing in the dark outside, his face pressed close to the window, staring straight at me. My name is Michael, and I live in a small house on the outskirts of Portland. My parents were out of town that night, and I was completely alone. Our house sits next to a wide backyard, surrounded by tall trees, and there are no neighbors nearby. That night, I was in my ground floor bedroom, playing on my computer with my headphones on. The only sound I could hear was the soft drizzle of rain on the roof. That's why the tapping caught my attention. The man was tall, wearing a dark jacket. He didn't move. He didn't knock on the door. He just stared. Silently, I froze for several seconds, my hands going cold, my heart pounding in my chest. I quickly turned off my monitor and slid down behind my bed to hide. The seconds passed slowly. All I could hear was the rain. I started to think maybe I had imagined it. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, it was coming from the side of the house, like he was moving around it. I slowly grabbed my phone and with shaking hands, peeked through the curtain just a little. No one was at the window. I felt a wave of relief until I noticed him standing at the far end of the backyard, under the rain, with his face tilted up, staring at me from a distance. He started moving toward the house slowly, his footsteps heavy on the wet ground. And I realized, in that moment, I was completely alone. I dialed 911, my hands trembling. As I tried to explain where I lived, I heard something that made my stomach drop. The sound of footsteps on the wooden back porch. He had climbed up. A second later, I heard him at the kitchen window. I could hear the wet squeak of his shoes on the wood and the faint sound of his hand sliding across the glass. Then, in a low, raspy voice, he said, "I know you see me." I crouched behind the kitchen table, frozen, my heart pounding like it would burst out of my chest. Then I heard the door handle move slowly. He was trying to open the back door. The sound of the old metal creaking was the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. I whispered to the 911 operator that he was trying to get inside, and they told me to stay hidden. They said a patrol was on the way. 5 minutes passed, but it felt like an hour. Finally, I heard the distant sound of sirens, and just like that, silence. I peeked out the small window toward the porch. He was gone. When the police arrived, they searched the backyard and the surrounding area, but found nothing. No footprints in the mud, no sign of him at all. It was like he had vanished into thin air. One of the officers told me something that still keeps me up at night. If he wanted to break in, he would have broken the glass immediately. He wasn't here to rob you, he just wanted to scare you. Or worse. Since that night, I can't sleep in a room with an uncovered window. Every raindrop or branch scraping against the glass makes me remember his wet face pressed to the window. And sometimes I can't help but wonder, is he still out there, waiting for me to look his way again? It started with the motion sensor light in my backyard flicking on. I live alone, and my backyard is fenced, so that light only turns on if something moves back there. I was lying on the couch, half asleep, when I noticed the sudden glow through the curtains. I sat up slowly, my heart already beating a little faster. I told myself it was probably just a raccoon. But then, I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, human. I grabbed my phone, but I didn't turn on the flashlight. I didn't want whoever, or whatever, was out there to know I was awake. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I waited, holding my breath. Then, a single knock on the glass door to my patio. Just one. Software. Every hair on my body stood up. I crawled to the corner of the living room, where I could peek through a tiny gap in the curtain, and there he was. A man. Tall. Still. His face barely visible in the glow of the sensor light. He wasn't knocking anymore. He was just staring. My first thought was to call the police, but my hands were shaking so much I nearly dropped my phone. Before I could dial, the light clicked off. Darkness. I couldn't see him anymore, but I could feel he was still there. And then, from the blackness outside, I heard a sound that froze my blood. Breathing, right against the glass. I slowly backed away, into the hallway, trying not to make a single noise. Then came the faintest whisper. I swear I heard it through the door. I see you. I didn't think. I ran to my bedroom and locked the door. I called 911, whispering as quietly as I could. They told me to stay put. An officer was on the way. But in those 10 minutes, I could hear him walking around the house. Each creak of the porch, each crunch of gravel, I felt like a trapped animal. Then, silence. When the police finally arrived, the backyard was empty. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. The officer checked the camera on my patio and showed me the last frame it captured. A blurry image of a man's face pressed against the glass, smiling. I moved out 2 weeks later, and every night since then, when the wind rattles a window, I wonder if he followed me, and if he's still out there, waiting for the next light to turn on.